Hey, you guys, let's do some more unsolved mysteries. I think we have 3 more left from Reader's Digest. Here's gum I'm chewing today, by the way. Icebreakers, ice cubes. See. Is it that one? Is it that one? Okay, here we go. Living statues. From 1917 to 1928, 500,000 people were afflicted with a ghastly condition that could be part of the plot line of a horror film. The victims, very much alive and conscious, found themselves in inexplicably frozen states. Their static bodies, prisons for their minds. Encephalitis lethargica, also known as the sleeping sickness, first appeared in Europe and quickly spread around the world, reaching epidemic levels in North America, Europe, and India by 1919. About a third of those stricken with the illness died. Of the survivors, nearly half eventually found themselves unable to physically interact with the world around them, all the while fully aware of their surroundings. Though occasionally capable of limited speech, eye motion, and even laughter, they generally appeared as living statues, totally motionless for hours, days, weeks, or years. The cause is unknown, but one theory is brain inflammation triggered by a rare strain of Streptococcus, the bacteria responsible for many sore throats each year. Science's best guess is that a bacteria mutated, provoking the immune system to attack the brain, leaving the victim helpless. None of this explains why the illness disappeared, only to resurface sporadically, be it in Europe in the 1950s or in China 10 years ago, when a 12-year-old girl was hospitalized for 5 weeks with the disease. Are such occurrences the new normal, or are they signs that EL could be planning something bigger any day? 2004 analysis of 20 patients with symptoms remarkably similar to EL concluded that whatever ailed them is still prevalent. As such, history's so-called sleeping sickness remains the stuff of nightmares. Oh my goodness. There's no pictures for that story. Thank goodness. That'd be spooky. Okay, next story. Vanishing Hijacker. On the night before Thanksgiving, 1971, a middle-aged man wearing a business suit boarded a commercial flight headed from Portland, Oregon to Seattle, Washington. He ordered a bourbon and soda, then calmly informed a flight attendant that he had a bomb in his anti-shake case. Having gotten her attention, he dictated the following message to the cockpit. I want $200,000 by 5 p.m. in cash. Put it in a knapsack. I want 2 back parachutes and 2 front parachutes. When we land, I want a fuel truck ready to refuel. No funny stuff, or I'll do the job. Oh, my goodness. His boarding pass read Dan Cooper, but thanks to a communication error, the newspapers identified him more cryptically as DB. Over the next 2 hours, DB Cooper never took off his dark sunglasses. He nursed a second bourbon and waited patiently while the plane circled Puget Sound. He seemed rather nice, one of the hijacked flight attendants said later. On the ground, authorities scrambled to assemble the cash, parachutes, and fuel truck while the 36 passengers on board were led to believe that the delay was entirely routine. Upon landing in Seattle and receiving a knapsack full of $20 bills and four parachutes, Cooper released the passengers and all but 4 of the crew. He demanded to be flown on to Mexico City, but first he had one final instruction. He was to be left alone in the cabin. As the plane took off at about 7:40 p.m., the 4-person crew huddled in the cockpit. Per Cooper, the plane flew below 10,000 feet at a speed slower than 200 knots, too low and slow for military jets to follow closely. Just 20 minutes later, a warning light flashed, indicating that the rear door had been opened and the staircase was deployed. When the plane landed in Reno, Nevada for refueling, the cabin was empty. Cooper had taken his knapsack, parachuted off into the night. Not a single witness saw him jump. He was never seen again. The ransom money, identifiable through serial numbers, was never used. Did Cooper plummet to his death? Did he survive, only to somehow lose the knapsack? Or had the money been merely an afterthought? More of a means of spinning a story for the newspapers and for history? The FBI spent the next 9 years trying to find the answers. Then, in 1980, a boy camping in rural Washington discovered 3 wads of cash along the banks of the Columbia River, which the FBI later identified as a portion of the ransom. But the trail remained cold until 2018, when a man named Carl Lauren presented the FBI with an audio tape of his deceased friend Walter Recca, confessing to being D.B. Cooper. Around the same time, a documentary filmmaker named Thomas Colbert was building a case that Cooper was actually 74-year-old Robert Rackstraw. Rackstraw, a former Special Forces paratrooper with 22 different aliases, had been a person of interest early on, but he was cleared in 1979. Colbert based his claim in part on a letter that Cooper allegedly sent to the Washington Post that included the number 717171. In Vietnam, Rackstraw was the 371st Regiment, or 371s. Neither of those stories were enough to convince the FBI, which is why the case of D.B. Cooper remains the only unsolved skyjacking in the history of American aviation. I kind of remember that story. When did it first happen? 1971. This is the last one. See what page? The end. Or that one. That one. There. Okay. The New World's Lost Colony. In March 1590, John White finally left England on a rescue mission to Roanoke Colony, the first permanent English settlement in North America. White was Roanoke's governor, but he had been away gathering food and supplies to bring back to the struggling colony. Almost since its founding in 1587, the fate of Roanoke's residents had weighed heavily on his mind, and for good reason. Among those he'd left on the island, part of what is now North Carolina's Outer Banks, were his wife, his daughter, his infant granddaughter, who was the first English child born in the New World. White returned to Roanoke on August 18, 1590, and found nothing. The entire settlement was abandoned, its homes and battlements dismantled. It was as if the entire colony of 115 persons had vanished. The only hint of Roanoke's fate was the word Croatian, or Croatoan. Croatoan was the word Croatoan carved onto a fence post, and the letters C-R-O carved into a tree. Since White had instructed his colonists to carve a Maltese cross on a tree if they were moved by force, the absence of one gave White hope that the settlers had relocated to nearby Croatoan Island, which was inhabited by the friendly Croatoan tribe. Unfortunately for White, he never did discover what happened to the colony. Soon after he arrived in Roanoke, a series of storms battered his ships, forcing his team back to their boats and eventually back to England. With an ocean once again between him and his family, a devastated wife surrendered Roanoke to its unknown fate. So what happened to the lost colonists? Perhaps they were abducted by Native Americans or moved inland to join a friendly tribe. Maybe they were slaughtered by Spaniards marching up from Florida, or tried to sail back to England on their own and got lost at sea. Archaeologists have yet to come up with any sign of the lost colony, and time is running out. Shoreline erosion threatens the island, making the lost colonists' outcome more of a mystery with each passing day. It's weird. Well, a reminder, if you enjoyed this video, to please push the thumbs up like button. I really appreciate it. And thanks for watching.